So write down your learning objective number or your homework problem number that this relates to. To learn about shapes, you may need to go back and review some stuff from general chemistry, but we'll go over the basics that you use here. So shapes don't really mean anything for the outside atoms, like the oxygen here, or the hydrogen here. Shapes really means, but you also, shape of the whole molecule is too complex to make conclusions about. So we're going to narrow in on one atom, a central atom, and say, what's the shape there? What are the angles there? So there are certain shapes we need to look for. Tetrahedral is going to be the most common shape for carbon, and that's going to happen when there are 4 things attached to it. So let's start with, say, this carbon here on Prozac. You can see one thing attached, the N, but there are actually 3 other things attached. 3 hydrogen. And we went over that in a previous video. So that has 4 things attached, so that's going to be tetrahedral. And anytime you have 4 single bonds to a central atom, it's going to be tetrahedral. So let's just go through and find T's. You can do this yourself. We're looking for everything that's tetrahedral. So you can pause and try it and then compare. Now I'll go back to minoxidil now. And that's it for tetrahedral central atoms. Let's go on. Let's go to bent. Bent's going to happen when you have something in the center with 2 bonds and either 1 or 2 lone pairs. And if you think about where you've seen this with oxygen and sulfur. So that's where we're going to start looking. Here's an oxygen, 2 things attached, 2 lone pairs. That's bent. Here's an oxygen, but it's out on the end. That's all we've got for bent in both of these. We've got trigonal pyramidal. I'm going to use Y for that, for pyramidal. We're going to see that when we have, I'll use my Y here, when we've got 3 things attached and a lone pair. Here it's an upside down trigonal pyramid, but typically that's going to be with N, just like bent was with O and tetrahedral was with C. So let's go in. Here's a possibility. It's got 1, 2, 3 things attached and a lone pair. That N is a trigonal pyramidal shape. These are all carbons. These are all carbons. These fluorines are out on the end, so shape doesn't really, they make a little line in, so we don't need to worry about that. Here we've got an N with 1, 2, 3 things attached and a lone pair. This is another trigonal pyramidal atom. Same here with this N. This N, 1, 2, 3 things attached. That's another one. There are 2 more N's, and these have double bonds, so that's going to be a little more confusing. There is another way to get a bent molecule, and that is if we have a double bond into that central atom. And a single bond and a lone pair. We do have that over here on minoxidil. Double bond end, a single bond, and a lone pair. That is going to be bent. But now we've got all these other carbons and an N plus that we don't have a shape for. So this may not show up in your homework problems, but let's add that in anyway. We're going to add one more shape. It is called trigonal planar. And that's going to happen if we have 3 bonds going into the center with no lone pairs. It can also happen, as we will see more commonly, if one of those is a double bond. So we're looking for things that have 3 things attached, and one of them is attached by a double bond. From this one here, we've got a carbon down there, a carbon there with a double bond, and a carbon there. So this, I'll put a P for planar. This here has that hydrogen coming off, so it has 3 things with a double bond. Planar, 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 planar. All of these aromatic rings that look like benzene. All of the atoms in them are trigonal planar. Go back over here. Trigonal planar, trigonal planar, planar, planar. This nitrogen with the plus charge is the same. It's got 3 things, no lone pair to push it out of the plane. That nitrogen is planar also. It's only this one here that has a lone pair but no third thing attached. 1, 2, lone pair. That's bent. So you're going to see these same patterns over and over. You can get used to them pretty quickly. They tell you the shape of molecules, and the shape of molecules tells you how molecules can interact with each other because they have to touch each other. So things can touch if their shapes fit together right. And then when they can touch, they can react if their charges match up right and if the energy's right. But shape is an important part of chemistry happening.